Dajaham. So now let's talk about Libra. Libra rules the body part of the pelvic triangle. So now how can we locate that? It's actually quite easy. You just go to the top of your femur. You find both sides of it, right? And you connect those with a horizontal imaginary line. And that's sort of the top of your triangle. And then from there, you just go down and you follow your thighs to form a triangle. And Libra represents the pelvic triangle. And that holds the bladder and the rectum. It actually also, Libra holds the internal reproductive organs, the ovaries in women and the prostate in men, okay? And actually also the area of the spine called the sacrum is also part of Libra's domain. So now let's get started with the bladder and the rectum. The rectum actually starts atop the bladder and it continues down to the anus, okay? So the bladder and the rectum, they hold what has no value to the body, right? And that the body wants to get rid of, right? And that is the urine and stool, right? And that's one way that Libra is really important to us because it knows when something is no longer valuable and it is actually able to get rid of it. The other important part of Libra is called the sacrum, which is the bottom part of the spine. And the English word sacred is actually, sort of coming actually from that, sacrum, we could say, is referring ultimately to that English name sacred, okay? And this really lets us know that Libra knows what is valuable and therefore can make the best decisions. So if Libra is in good shape, that means that a person is able to let go what's no longer good in their life because it sees a better opportunity for them to get ahead in life. If Libra is in a bad condition, then the person is just not able to see the better situation, the better opportunity for them, okay? They make bad decisions because they just don't know what is actually good for them. And they don't know what situation to trade for another one, what job to trade for another one, what person to trade for another one, right? Because they just can't see what is actually what has actually greater value for them. But Libra has this amazing quality because it is the sign of business, exchange and trade. And so it really knows how to do business, right? Now, what is a successful business model? Well, you got something of little value and you turn it into something of great value, right? And the bigger your profit margin, the better you are in business. But we can apply this really to everything in our life, right? Libra knows how to exchange something of less value with something of greater value. Now, when we are talking about business, the best business is really that if you can turn some junk into something really valuable, right? And all you do is you just find a lot of something that has little value and then you sell it, right? For a greater price, right? A person who has Venus in Virgo, however, they are going to have trouble doing that, right? You can visit them at home and you go into their garage and there's going to be this huge pile of junk. Or you look behind their house, there will be a huge pile of junk, right? In their closet, they're gonna keep so much junk, right? They actually have so much stuff that they don't use anymore, but somehow or another, they, even though they don't use it, it doesn't have value for them, and they could turn it into money, they just don't do it, right? And sometimes it is so much they could really make a little fortune by selling it, right? But somehow or another, they don't think about that. And so they ignore the junk instead of actually turning it into money. But Libra is the sign of saying, hey, I can make this stuff that is useless to me valuable in my life, right? And this is, and this is what Libra is doing, okay? Now, the part of the spine that is in Libra is called the sacrum. which comes from the word sacred in English. And again, it shows that Libra really has to do with the good stuff in life. Okay? And if people have a healthy Libra, then they are going to find a way that they can make what's less desirable really useful. Okay? Even within themselves, how can we take what doesn't seem very useful within ourselves, right, and turn it into something that will enrich our life and make our life better? Well, Libra is all about that exchange and finding a way to present ourselves in a way so that we can get a validating response, right? Yes, the human body in many ways, isn't all that great, but we can turn it into something valuable and fulfilling if we know how to do that. And so Libra is able to do that, right? And that is why Libra is just able to literally have a great experience anywhere it goes. So now let's talk about the planets that are exalted and debilitated in Libra. So first, Saturn is the planet that is exalted in Libra. Now, Saturn rules, he rules the trash, the bathroom, all those types of things. But all this stuff is useful, and that's why Saturn is exalted in Libra, right? Libra is the sign that says, hey, I'm the body part that can hold what is no good until it's actually useful, okay? And then I can enjoy it. I can do so many things with it. I can sell it, I can make money with it, or I find some other way to create something good out of it, okay? And so people who have Saturn in Libra, they have a knack for turning anything into something useful, right? Even the things that other people would just think, oh my God, what's that great about this? They would just, deal with it as much as they have to, but, then they would just leave it. But Saturn in Libra is really brings out the most of Libra, because it can turn any experience into an experience where I can express love, where I can see beauty, where it just has a lot of fulfillment in life, okay? And so it can really turn anything into something worthwhile and enjoyable, right? Now, the Sun, on the other hand, is debilitated in Libra. And the reason is because the Sun is pure, it's bright, it's noble, and it just doesn't do well in Libra. Okay, when the Sun is put in the part of the body where the trash is, then the Sun is just not very happy there, because the Sun is not our trash, right? It's in fact the opposite. It's the best part of us, right? We are meant to shine brightly in the world, to realize our greatest potential. The Sun is our most authentic, pure expression of who we are, and we don't want to trade that in for anything, right? What to speak of, trade it as if it was some commodity, right? So the Sun is our unique expression of who we are, that inspires us to really do great things in this world. But when it's in Libra and the body part of, oh my God, there is some trash here, then what am I going to trade it in for then, right? And that's exactly what Sun in Libra does. It trades in the best part of itself as some commodity to get something in return, okay? But of course, that is never a good trade, right? Because how can you really benefit from trading the best part of yourself in? There's just nothing going to be better that it's a worthwhile trade, right? And therefore, there's a tendency for Sun in Libra to really sell themselves short, okay? Instead of doing the great things that they're inspired to do, they will just sell themselves out to a job, or they will, rather just work for someone and they are great inspirations, right? Or they want to be with a person in a relationship and someone other just support that person and whatever that person wants, and just, basically just forget about themselves, okay? Now, if the sun has some delight from other planets, then actually the sun in Libra can do really fine. So don't think like, oh my God, I know a sun in Libra person is like that. Well, there's quite a lot of people that have sun in Libra, and you really have to look in the individual chart. So you want to see some friendly influence, right, from the friends of the sun, which is Moon, Mars, and Jupiter, to see if the sun actually has dignity, right, has confidence, if the sun is inspired to express themselves in an authentic way, okay? And then, the sun in Libra is really going to do well. However, if the sun is heavily afflicted in Libra, then likely they are going to trade themselves in for something of much lesser value, okay? The sun is really the best part of us. That's who we are and the unique contribution that we make in this world as a reflection of who we are, and that is cannot be really traded in for anything. That is not going to be a bad deal in the end, okay? But that's what the sun in Libra tends to do when it is afflicted, okay? And when it has friendly influences, then that will greatly help a sun in Libra person to gradually develop their self-esteem. Now, Saturn, on the other hand, is of course all our trash, and it's what we don't want. And if we can trade that in for anything else, right, that's probably always going to be better, right, whatever it is that we get in return. And of course, this is when we are going to get ahead in life, right? This is when we are going to do really good. And that's what Saturn is when it's exalted in Libra, okay? And then you have the other planets in between. Depending on their Avashtas, they will perform somewhere, in between what those two planets are capable of, okay? So now let's talk a little bit more about sort of the other, components that are sort of part of the body section of Libra. The internal sexual organs are also part of Libra. And our internal sexual organs, they are all about creating offspring. Now, Saturn is exalted in Libra because Saturn is all about survival. People with a strong Saturn, they're very sexual because of the survival of the species, okay? Now, Saturn is not only, your personal survival, but it is also survival of the species. People with a strong Saturn, they want kids in the context because they want their genes to live on, right? They want that some part of themselves is going to survive, right? And procreation really with Saturn here is really sort of the survival of the species, something that's very critical, of course, to human life. And and Saturn in Libra really thinks about, how can part of oneself live on through one's children, okay? And and also what is very interesting is actually when we are looking at what really creates an embryo that sort of gradually, turns into a complete human being, after a few months, it is actually the fluids of man and woman coming together. And this is, probably the epitome of the trade that is happening in Libra, right? When you trade those liquids in for a baby, right? A full, human being, You just have to wait for a few months and then, you get the final product. So this is really the result of love, right? When two people come together, they turn something that seems like really just useless, and then they turn it into something so wonderful, okay, and unique and special. So now Scorpio. Scorpio rules the covered parts. Scorpio represents the external sexual organs and the anus. So these are the vulnerable organs that are not protected and that are also not fortified by bone or anything like that. So Scorpio therefore represents our vulnerabilities, right? Scorpio is a vulnerable place. It is a soft place. And the covered parts are really the delicate places that we need to protect, right? Even in primitive societies where sort of no one wears any clothes, both men and women, they tend to wear things down in that little protected area, okay? So Scorpio is really the section of our body where the genitals are, and it also includes the anus, okay, which is close to the sexual organs, maybe an inch or two next to it. So there's no planets exalted in Scorpio, but Moon is debilitated there. The Moon is about fulfilling our needs, and Scorpio is about our vulnerabilities. So when the Moon is debilitated in Scorpio, a person is trying to get their needs met through what's unprotected, what has no foundation, and which gives no security. So when Moon is actually debilitated, okay, in those first 3 degrees of Scorpio, a person becomes very scattered, right? Because they have all sorts of fears and phobias to the degree that they can't even function properly anymore because they are trying to fulfill their needs through them. And so they just can't live their life in a healthy way, okay? Because a need really must be fulfilled in a concrete way, a way that actually allows us to have a secure life, that have fulfillment, right? And that allows us really to live a happy life, okay? And that's what the Moon in Taurus is capable of, right? Where it's exalted, right? This is where a person is able to enjoy their life in a harmonious way, in a solid and concrete way. And they, Taurus is really also the sign of, it's ruled by Venus, so there's a balance of body, mind, and spirit, and that actually creates that emotional stability and financial security, okay? And that's why Moon and Taurus people are just so expert to create sort of the best possible material life for them, right? Because they can connect with their body, they can connect with their environment and with the people to in a way that allows them to fulfill their needs, right? And they always make sort of sure that those different experiences of life, of their body, their mind, and spirit, that they are sort of harmonious, right? That their heart and feeling experiences are positive, right? And then they can sort of always relate to the world in a very pleasing and fulfilling way. So now when the Moon is debilitated in Scorpio, then we get sort of the opposite picture, okay? Because Scorpios are vulnerable parts. And this is now when a person lives a life that is based on disharmony, and it focuses on weaknesses. And that, of course, gets a person into mental disorders and addictions, right? Because a person doesn't have an emotional foundation anymore. They don't have an experience of sort of peace, right? And for them, for them, in extreme cases, really, it can literally just be to have some type of addiction where they simply go from one sort of extreme experience to the next. Okay. Now, of course, Scorpio can then, as a result, go to a total other direction where they want to totally numb any type of actually emotional experience, right? So it becomes a very extreme experience when the moon is actually debilitated in Scorpio, because now the person is really looking for happiness in the worst possible manner, right? And it goes into these, it's a very sort of a vicious cycle that they're into, from trying to be happy with something that's with sort of the worst experiences that one can have in life, to basically not wanting to experience any feeling at all. Okay. And yes, again, one has to look here towards positive influences towards the moon, right? The Sun and Mercury are friends. Jupiter would also help tremendously here as well. So that can really help that moon and help them to really grow positive feelings, a heart that learns to act on good instincts, right? And a heart that has thoughts and feelings that are going to actually lead to a fulfilling life. Okay. Now, Scorpio, of course, is the body part where our genitals is, and this is, of course, where we experience sexual intimacy. Sex is a natural part of human life, and it plays, of course, an important role in our life. Our body has genitals, and along with that comes sex desire, which is basically the desire to use our genitals in a sexual way. And so, having a body, with genitals, it is normal to sort of fulfill sexual desires in a regular way. That is normal for the body and also for the mind as well. Of course, sex becomes important when we want to, create offspring, right? Which can also, of course, be an experience of where two people want to create something beautiful together. Now, of course, ideally for married people, the depth of their sex life and how much they're able to be free and passionate and spontaneous, right? And without any fear and inhibition in sex, ultimately that really shows how much they have developed, trust and love for each other, right? And this is probably, this is a very important indicator ultimately, how much two people love each other, right? How much are you able to trust another person, right? That really shows how intimately you are connected with this person, right? Is how much love is there and how much fear is there, right? So for that matter, sex life is just, or can be a wonderful expression of love. And when Scorpio is afflicted, right, when the moon is there, debilitated, or also when Mars is there, right, because Mars considers Saturn as an enemy, then a person, of course, has all sorts of trust issues. A person has weird ideas about sex life. They might totally abstain from it, right? Or on the other hand, they might want to prove to themselves that they have no issues and then do all sorts of crazy and bold sexual things, right? But the underlying idea is that when Scorpio is afflicted, that sex life is based on some type of fear and trauma, and then it won't, end up basically as an intimate experience as you would love it to be. Okay, so Scorpio is really the covered parts for a reason, right? Because Scorpio really wants us to be in control over our covered parts. Okay. If we are not in control of our covered parts, then we might end up messing up our life. Okay. Of course, if there's trust issues, right, then there's a lot of insecurity and instability in our life, and so it is very, very important that we that we learn to really connect intimately with another person. Right? Scorpio rules transformation, it rules healing, and ultimately it rules to trust another person. Okay, and this happens when we basically give up any type of fear that another person might hurt us. Okay, and this is really what is needed, that type of transformation, right? And so it becomes really, really important that we work out, any type of issues that get really in the way to be satisfied in our sex life. Okay, because that will show some form of fear to get hurt, to be abandoned. There will be something that you just can't trust this person, right? There will be a disconnection of sort that makes you feel insecure, right? And that is sooner or later just gonna lead to another huge crisis, perhaps also separation and breakup again. That's why it is so important that we always look towards the friendly influences that a planet might get. Okay, so let's say if Saturn is in Scorpio, that of course creates a lot of fear in intimacy. A person has trust issues, but then you have to see, does Saturn get positive? Does it get friendly influences? Okay. In general, the planets that consider Mars as a friend, they will do very well in Scorpio to help us, work out our issues that we have towards intimacy and sex. Okay, which are the Sun, Jupiter, and Mars there, right? They're gonna give a person a lot of courage, confidence, and determination that they can go through the transformation, the healing that they need, so that they can give up all that fear from being really intimate with another person, right? And so this is very, very important, that we really, really develop a healthy Scorpio in our horoscope, because it is the original 8th house. It is the covered parts. We need to really be in control of those covered parts, right? Because otherwise, if you're not in control of those parts, then we might really end up messing up our life. At least there will always be that sort of insecurity and instability in our life. There will not be this sort of real intimate experience. And so it's very, very important that we're really honest with ourselves, and those negative feelings that there might be there, that are the reason why we, just can't just fully embrace another person.